Hello, and welcome back to Le Crime Noir. Before we begin, feel free to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I love reading every single one. If you enjoy drifting into dark, chilling tales whispered through the tears of Le Crime Noir, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. On a very sad note, I have to share something heavy on my heart. Our channel has been demonetized by YouTube because of their inauthentic policy. We create these videos with so much hard work and passion, and we have no other source of income, but YouTube has disabled our monetization. Now we're turning to all of you, our dear audience, for your suggestions. What should we do next? How can we keep this channel running and continue bringing you these stories? Please tell us in the comments. Your ideas and support mean everything to us right now. Now, get comfortable, dim the lights if you dare, relax your mind, let the outside world fade away. And let's begin. Story 5. Falling asleep has never been hard for me. If anything, it happens too fast. I can sit on the couch for just a minute and wake up hours later with the TV still playing. I can lie down fully dressed and be out before my head even settles into the pillow. I used to think that was a good thing, like I had some kind of talent other people would pay for. The problem has always been the other part. Waking up. No matter how long I sleep, I wake up wiped out. Not normal tired, not I stayed up too late tired. It's more like my body has been drained while I was unconscious, like something took the rest out of me and left the empty shell behind. My eyes burn. My limbs feel heavy. Even my thoughts feel slow, like they're moving through mud. At first I blamed my job. Work had been chaotic for weeks, and I'd been doing that thing where you tell yourself you're fine while you keep adding more stress on top of stress. I started going to bed earlier. I stopped drinking coffee after lunch. I tried those sleep hygiene rules people talk about, like dimming the lights and keeping my phone away from the bed. Nothing changed. 8 hours, I woke up exhausted. 9 hours, same thing. 10 hours on a weekend, and I still got out of bed feeling like I'd been awake all night, staring at the ceiling, fighting off panic. Then other things started happening. Little things at first. A bruise on my thigh, the kind you get from bumping into a table. A sore shoulder like I slept at a bad angle. I'd shrug it off, because bruises happen. Bodies are weird. You don't remember every minor hit from the day before. But the bruises kept showing up in places that didn't make sense. On the inside of my upper arm, along my ribs, around my wrist like a faint grip mark, a deep ache in my jaw one morning, like I had been clenching my teeth for hours. Another day, my neck felt strained, like I'd held it in an unnatural position. I'd stand in front of the bathroom mirror, turning side to side, trying to match the pain to some normal explanation, and I never could. I started getting this uncomfortable thought that I didn't like saying out loud, even to myself. What if I was doing things at night and not remembering? Sleepwalking. Falling. Hitting something. Maybe even hurting myself without realizing it. I mentioned it to a friend over coffee, trying to play it off like it was a quirky mystery instead of something that was making my stomach twist with dread. She didn't laugh. She actually looked concerned, which made it worse. Try a sleep tracking app, she said. One of those that records sounds. Snoring, talking, breathing patterns. It might help you figure out what's going on. It sounded harmless. A simple tool, like a step counter for sleep. Something that would give me data instead of guesses. I downloaded one that had decent reviews, gave it microphone access, and set it up beside my bed. It asked for a bedtime window and promised it would only save interesting clips, not record constantly like a surveillance device. That made me feel better. The first night, nothing stood out. In the morning, I checked the app while I brushed my teeth. It showed a graph of my sleep, light, deep, awake moments. A few audio clips. When I played them, I heard normal stuff. My breathing, a couple of bed shifts, the soft rustle of sheets. There was even one clip where I exhaled through my nose in a way that sounded almost like a tiny laugh. That was it. It made me feel a little silly for being worried. The second night was the same. A few quiet clips, nothing unusual. I started to relax. Maybe I really was just stressed, and the bruises were coincidence. The third night changed everything. When I opened the app that morning, I noticed a recording at 3:15 a.m. I only noticed it because the waveform looked different. Longer, thicker, like there was actual sound instead of soft background noise. The clip wasn't labeled snore or movement like the others. It just sat there with a timestamp like a question. I pressed play. At first, it sounded like the earlier clips. Quiet. That faint electronic hush you get when a microphone is recording silence. Then, very clearly, I heard a word. Wait. My voice. It sounded wrong, but it was mine. Slow and heavy, like I was talking with my mouth half closed, like the word had to drag itself out of sleep. It gave me a cold, uncomfortable feeling, hearing myself sound so empty. There was a long pause after that. I could hear my breathing, deep and steady, like I was asleep even though I'd just spoken. Then, after another stretch of nothing, I heard myself again. Not yet. The clip ended a second later. I sat on the edge of my bed for a while with the phone in my hand, replaying the sound in my head. It didn't feel like random sleep talking. It sounded like a response, like I had been listening to someone and answering them. Still, I tried to be normal about it. I told myself people talk in their sleep all the time. An ex of mine used to claim I said weird things at night. I'd always assumed he was exaggerating or trying to mess with me. Maybe he hadn't been. But even if that explained the words, it didn't explain how I woke up every morning feeling like I'd been run through a machine. It didn't explain bruises that looked like someone's fingers had been there. It didn't explain the way my body felt used. I went through my day with the recording stuck in my head, like a song you can't stop hearing. I caught myself checking the time constantly, dreading nighttime, but also wanting it, because part of me wanted proof. I wanted to catch myself doing something and finally understand. That night I went to bed earlier than usual, like that could somehow change the outcome. I set the phone closer to my pillow. I turned the volume down on everything. No TV, no fan. I wanted clean audio, no excuses. I fell asleep easily, like always. The moment my head hit the pillow, I was gone. In the morning, the app had another clip. 3:15 a.m. Same time. That alone made my skin prickle. If it was random sleep talking, why would it happen at the exact same minute? I stared at the clip for a full minute before I pressed play. I didn't want to hear it, but not hearing it felt worse. This one started immediately. No long stretch of silence. No. My voice again. Sharp, like I was more awake this time. Then a pause long enough that I could hear a small breath in through my nose. Then I spoke again. You shouldn't have done that. The words came out slower, like I was forcing them through clenched teeth. For a second, I almost felt relieved, because it was clearly me, clearly my voice. But then another voice came in, so close to the microphone it sounded like it was in the bed with me. It sounded like me, but not fully. Like someone was doing an impression of my voice and getting it almost right, but not quite. It was too low, too stretched out, and underneath it was something layered, like more than one mouth speaking at the same time. Stop looking. The clip ended right there. Not like the conversation naturally stopped, but like someone cut the sound off midair, like someone hit a button. My first thought was the app had glitched. Maybe it only saved a certain length. Maybe it stopped recording to save battery. I went into settings immediately, scrolling through options like I could find a simple explanation hidden behind a toggle switch. Nothing. No time limit. No auto cut option. No external audio source. No other device connected. The only microphone was the phone's. The only input was whatever was happening in my bedroom. I walked through the apartment, checking stupid things I didn't believe in. Windows locked. Doors locked. No TV on. No laptop playing a video in another room. The place was quiet. It was just me. It always was. That night, I tried to control everything I could. I closed every window, even though it was warm. I locked the bedroom door, even though I don't live with anyone. I pushed the phone even closer to my pillow, like I was daring the sound to show itself clearly. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember lying there tense, listening to the house settle. Then there's a blank, and then it's morning again. Exhausted, like my body had been awake and busy while my mind was gone. There was a new recording, 3:15 a.m. This one was different. When I looked at the waveform, it was thin, barely there, like a pencil line. I almost thought it was empty, but it was still marked as event, like the app had caught something. I pressed play. At first, it sounded like silence, just that faint static. Then, underneath, I heard a low sound that didn't belong to the room. Too low to understand, like whispering through a wall. I turned the volume up. The whispering stayed just out of reach. It wasn't random noise. It had rhythm, like language, like someone speaking softly so they wouldn't be overheard. I should have stopped there. I should have closed the app and thrown my phone across the room and called my friend and said, "I'm coming over. I don't want to be alone." But curiosity is a stupid, powerful thing, and at that moment, it felt like the only weapon I had. If I could just hear it clearly, maybe it would become something normal. Maybe it would become explainable. I brought the phone closer to my ear. The whispering moved around in the sound, like it was coming from slightly different directions. I held my breath without realizing it, focusing so hard my ears started to ache. I still couldn't make out full words, but I could tell it was intentional. It had pauses. It had changes in tone, like a conversation. So I pressed the speaker even tighter against my ear, and then a scream tore through the recording, so sudden and loud it made my whole body jerk. It wasn't the kind of scream you hear in movies, clean and dramatic. It sounded real, close, human. The shock of it made my fingers loosen, and I dropped the phone. It hit the floor with a hard slap, but the audio kept playing. Silence returned as if nothing had happened, just the faint static. My own heart pounding loud enough that for a second I couldn't tell which sound was in the room and which was in the recording. Then, right before the clip ended, I heard words. Clear, calm, and too close. Too close. I sat on my bedroom floor, staring at the phone like it had become an animal. My hands were shaking. My throat felt tight, like I might gag. I didn't even realize I was crying until I wiped my face and my fingers came away wet. I didn't sleep much that night. Every time my thoughts started to drift and my body began that slow slide into sleep, panic snapped me back awake. I kept a lamp on. I checked the clock constantly. I stared at the door like something might come through it. At some point, I must have fallen asleep anyway, because when I opened my eyes, it was morning, and I felt worse than ever. My body didn't just feel tired. It felt punished, like I had been doing hard labor in my sleep, lifting and dragging and fighting. My muscles ached in places I hadn't worked out. I found a new bruise near my hip, dark and spreading, and another one on my upper arm. My jaw hurt again, deep in the joint. The phone was on my pillow, closer to my face than I remembered leaving it. I was sure I'd dropped it on the floor. I was sure I'd left it there. But there it was, placed like someone had set it gently beside my head after I fell asleep. The app showed a new notification, one new recording. I stared at it for a long time, thumb hovering. I didn't want to hear it. I also felt like I had to. Like not listening would be the same as letting someone stand in the corner of my room unchallenged. My whole body was trembling when I pressed play. Breathing filled the speaker. Heavy, uneven breathing. Mine. It sounded like I'd been running, like I'd been trying not to panic, like I'd been pushing air into lungs that didn't want to work. I could hear saliva click in my mouth. I could hear the wet swallow of a throat too dry. Then there was movement, fabric shifting, the soft squeak of mattress springs, the sound of someone sitting up. My stomach tightened. Then footsteps, not the small shuffle of sleepwalking, but real steps placed with purpose. They moved across the room, closer to the phone. I could hear the floorboard creak at a spot I recognized, the one near my dresser that always complains when you step on it. I realized I'd stopped breathing in real life, holding still in bed as if whatever I did now could change what had happened then. Another set of breathing entered the recording. Not mine. It was quieter, smoother, almost amused. It didn't have the strain my breathing had. It sounded like someone standing very close, enjoying the fact that I couldn't see them. Then, the voice came, right beside the mic. That wrong version of my voice, the one that sounded like someone had learned my tone and was wearing it. She's listening. She can hear us now. The clip ended. I didn't replay it. I couldn't. The words sat inside my head like a splinter. I checked the timestamp automatically, expecting 3:15 a.m., because that was the pattern. That was when the weirdness happened, when I was asleep and defenseless. But the time on the recording wasn't 3:15. It was 8:05 a.m. I looked at the clock on my phone, the actual real time at the top of the screen. 8:05 a.m. The blood drained out of my face so fast, I felt lightheaded. It hadn't waited for me to sleep. Whatever voice that was, whatever was happening in my room, had happened right at the moment I was awake enough to press play. Right at the moment I could hear it, like it knew. Like it had been watching me check the app every morning, learning when I listened, learning how to reach me. The thought made my skin crawl, and I pulled the blanket up even though the room wasn't cold. I deleted the app that day. I deleted it the way you pull your hand away from a hot stove, fast and shaking, like speed could undo the damage. I went through my phone settings and removed microphone permissions. I restarted the phone twice. I felt ridiculous and terrified at the same time. But deleting it didn't fix anything. Every morning after that, I still woke up exhausted. Not just exhausted, worse. Like the more I fought it, the more drained I became. The bruises showed up more often. Darker. Sometimes I'd find them in clusters, like someone had held me in place. Sometimes my wrists would ache like they'd been twisted. I started dreading nighttime in a way I'd never experienced before. The idea of closing my eyes felt unsafe. I'd lie in bed with my heart racing, telling myself I would stay awake, that I would push through the night and prove I was in control. But staying awake didn't feel like a solution anymore, because the last recording hadn't happened in the middle of the night. It had happened at 8:05 a.m., at the exact moment I was there holding my phone. If it didn't need me asleep, then what was I supposed to do? That thought followed me all day like a shadow. I couldn't focus on work. I couldn't enjoy anything. Even sitting in public didn't make me feel safer. Because the real fear wasn't that someone would break in. The fear was that something was already inside my life, something that didn't need to touch a lock to get to me. I tried to convince myself it was anxiety, that I was spiraling, that exhaustion can make you paranoid, that bruises can come from bumping into things and forgetting because you're tired, that audio recordings can glitch, that apps can do strange stuff with noise, turning random sounds into patterns your brain wants to recognize. But that didn't explain the voice that sounded like me and not me. It didn't explain the way the recording ended, like someone had chosen to stop it. It didn't explain the words. She's listening. She can hear us now. I didn't want to sleep that night. I didn't even want to lie down. I stayed on the couch with the lights on, trying to keep my mind busy with anything, videos, music, a book I couldn't focus on. My eyes burned and my head nodded, and each time it did, I snapped back up with a jolt of fear. I told myself if I could just make it to morning, I'd be okay. But that's the lie I always tell myself, and it never works, because morning is when I feel the worst. At some point, I must have drifted off. I don't remember it happening, just that blank drop into nothing, and then I was awake again with that same heavy, sick exhaustion sitting on my chest. My phone was in my hand. I didn't remember picking it up. When I looked at the screen, my stomach turned over. The app was back. Not a new app that looked similar. The same one. Same icon. Same layout. Like it had never been deleted at all. Like my phone had simply decided to put it back where it belonged. There was a notification waiting for me. One new recording. I stared at it until my eyes watered. My finger hovered, refusing to touch it, because part of me was sure that pressing play was exactly what it wanted. Like the act of listening was an invitation. And that was the worst part. Even without opening it, I could see the little indicator moving. The app was recording right now, in real time, as if someone had started it and left it running. As if something was still talking. Not in the past, not at 3:15 a.m., not in some clip I could choose to hear or ignore. Now, in my room, with me awake. Story 4. My name is Malcolm. I'm a senior, about 190, varsity starter. This trip was supposed to be simple. We were flying out for an international tournament somewhere in Georgia. That was the plan the whole time. Straight flight, land, hotel, weigh-ins, wrestle, fly home. Halfway through the flight, the pilot came on and said we had to reroute because of weather. He said it like it was nothing, like it happened all the time. Nobody panicked. A few guys groaned because any delay messes with weight cuts and sleep, but that was it. We were all tired, and it didn't seem worth stressing about. We landed at an airport that wasn't on our itinerary. At first, I didn't think much of it. I assumed it was a quick stop or a layover while they waited out the storm, but when we got off the plane and walked into the terminal, there was a big sign above the main entryway. Clean letters, like it was a real place with real funding, not some small regional runway. It said, Adzar International. I did what anyone would do. I pulled out my phone and looked it up. I expected a country, a region, at least a city. I even expected the usual thing where it corrects you, like, did you mean? Or it gives you something close. Nothing came up. Not no results found, like when you mess up a word. Not even a slow loading screen. It was like I had typed nothing at all. Just blank. I tried again. Same thing. I switched browsers. Same thing. I tried searching the airport name instead of the country name. Still nothing. At first I blamed my service. Airports are weird like that. But my phone wasn't acting dead. Texts were going through. Apps opened. I could scroll social media. Everything else loaded. It wasn't a connection issue. It was just anything about this place that didn't exist. But it obviously did exist, because I was standing there with my team under a sign that said it did. I walked over to one of the airport workers near a counter and asked him what country we were in. He didn't look confused. He didn't ask me to repeat it. He didn't laugh. He just said, calm as anything, Adzar. I said no, Like, what country is Adzar in? That's when he paused. Not long, but long enough that it felt like his brain had to find the right response. Then he said, "This one." He said it like it was obvious, like I was being stupid, like I had asked what water was made of and he was tired of explaining it to people. I tried again, slower, thinking maybe it was a language thing, but honestly, his English was perfect. Everyone's English was perfect. Signs were in English. Announcements were in English. This wasn't confusion. It was something else. It was like I was asking a question that wasn't allowed. Coach yelled for us to grab our bags and stop wandering. He said it the way he says it when he wants you to stop messing around, like he thought I was sightseeing. The other guys didn't even look bothered. A couple of them were laughing about how the airport looked like a mall. Nobody seemed to care that the place we were standing in could not be found online. We got our luggage and went outside to a bus that was already waiting. Not a rental shuttle with logos, just a plain bus. No company name, no license plate that I could see. The windows were tinted dark enough that you couldn't tell who was inside until the door opened. The driver didn't greet us. He just stared forward, hands on the wheel, and waited for Coach to count heads. Then we pulled out. That's when things started feeling actually wrong. There were no road signs, no billboards for local restaurants, no signs telling you what city you were entering, no flags, nothing that grounded you. The road itself looked clean and maintained, but it felt like a road in a video game before the developers add details. Streetlights, sidewalks, buildings, all the pieces were there, but none of them said anything. The buildings went on, block after block, and they all looked similar. Not identical, but similar in the way something is similar when it's built from the same template. Same height, same colors, same blank windows. I opened maps. It showed a road line and a little blue dot where we were. It even updated as we moved. But there was no country name at the top. No city name. No label. Just the road. A teammate leaned over the seat and asked the driver how far the hotel was. The driver didn't turn his head. He just said not long, but we kept driving. 10 minutes passed. Then 20. Then more. It felt like at least an hour. And the view didn't change. Not even a little. No skyline. No neighborhoods. No downtown. Just the same stretch of buildings and lamps and empty sidewalks. Then I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. The same advertisement kept coming up. Not the same type of ad. The same exact one. Every few minutes, on the side of the road, like someone had copy-pasted it. It was a poster for the tournament, in English, with the tournament logo and the dates. I pointed it out to the guy next to me and tried to play it off like a joke. I said something dumb like communists, right? No originality. The driver finally reacted. He didn't say anything, but he looked at me in the mirror. It wasn't a normal annoyed glance. It was sharp, like a warning. I leaned back and lowered my voice. I said to my teammate, too loud, I guess. Nobody else laughed. Nobody else even reacted like they heard it. Most of them just stared forward, quiet in that wrestler way where you're half asleep and half locked in. I told myself I was overthinking it. We had been traveling. I was cutting weight. Stress does weird things to your head. I decided I'd sleep the rest of the ride and sort it out later. We finally got to the hotel. From the outside, it looked normal. Cheap tournament hotel. The kind of place you stay 2 nights, complain about the showers, and forget as soon as you're home. Nothing about it screamed horror movie. But inside was different. The lobby was empty. Not quiet, because it's late. Empty like no one had ever used it. No families checking in. No tourists. No random people sitting on couches. Just silence and the hum of lights. There was one guy behind the front desk. He wasn't on his phone. He wasn't typing. He was just standing there, straight as a post. The moment we walked in, I saw room keys already laid out on the counter, lined up like they had been waiting. The front desk guy started handing them out one by one. He didn't ask for names. He didn't ask for IDs. He didn't even confirm which rooms were doubles, and he got every single one right. He handed Coach his key, then handed keys to my teammates in the exact pairs they were supposed to be in. Like he had watched our room assignments being made. Like he had known us before we arrived. When it was my turn, he slid the key across without looking up. Third floor. I took it and went up with my roommate. The hallway smelled like cleaner, but not in a fresh way. In a way that reminded me of a hospital. Everything looked clean, but it didn't feel lived in. The carpet didn't have any wear. The walls didn't have scuffs. The air didn't have that normal mix of old ack and perfume and leftover food that hotels always have. Our room was the same. Beds made tight. Towels perfectly folded. Not a single random hair in the bathroom. Not one stain on the chair. It looked like a room that had been set up for a picture, not used by actual people. I tried turning on the TV because I wanted something normal, something to make my brain stop spinning. It turned on immediately. There was only one channel. It was wrestling. Not our kind, but pro wrestling. Two guys, bright lights, loud crowd. Except it wasn't a live channel, and it wasn't a normal replay schedule. It was the same match, over and over. Same two guys, same entrance, same moves in the same order, same camera angles. I watched long enough to be sure I wasn't imagining it, and I swear the score on the screen changed halfway through, but nothing in the match changed with it. Like the numbers were being edited while the footage stayed the same. My roommate didn't seem interested. He sat on the bed and started scrolling his phone like this was just another night before a tournament. Like we weren't in a place we couldn't name. I went downstairs because I needed food. I was already down to 188, and I could afford a few bites before weigh-ins. A couple of my teammates were in the lobby, sitting like they were waiting for something, but nobody was really talking. Usually on a trip there's noise, jokes, guys arguing about video games, someone complaining about the bus, someone asking where the nearest fast food is. This felt like a waiting room. The guy at the front desk was still there, in the same exact position. He hadn't shifted his weight. He hadn't moved his hands. He looked less like a worker and more like something placed there to fill the space. The image that popped into my head was messed up, but it was the only way I could describe it. Like there was a metal pole running straight up through him, holding him in place. I asked him if there was anywhere nearby to eat. He said, "The dining room is open." I didn't remember seeing a dining room when we came in. The lobby didn't look big enough for one. I asked where it was. He lifted one hand and pointed down a hallway to the right. I stared because I was almost sure that hallway hadn't been there before. I don't mean I missed it. I mean, the wall had looked solid. I didn't say that out loud. I just walked toward it. Because what else do you do? My teammates followed behind like they already knew where it was. The hallway opened into a large room with tables already set, like a banquet hall. Plates were already on the tables. Not a buffet line, not servers walking around, just plates waiting, like the food had been prepared for exact seats. The strangest part was that it was still warm. I sat down, and one of my teammates across from me frowned at his plate and said, "This is the same thing as yesterday." I laughed a little because it sounded like the kind of complaint guys make all the time. I said, "Weight cut's getting to you." He didn't laugh. He stared at me like he was angry, like I had said something cruel without realizing it. I looked down at my plate and tried to decide if I was even hungry or if I was eating, because that's what you do. It was chicken, rice, and a round bread I didn't recognize, with a black sauce draped over it. The sauce looked thick, almost glossy. I leaned in and asked him quietly what he meant about yesterday. He shook his head once, like he didn't want to say it. Then he said, "You'll feel it after your match." "What match?" I asked. He stared at me like I was messing with him on purpose. Then he said, "Your second one." I hadn't wrestled yet. We had literally just arrived. I tried to push it, tried to get him to explain what he meant, but he wouldn't. He just ate, slow and blank, like he was doing it because he had to. I went back upstairs after that. My appetite was gone. I told myself I was tired, that everything felt weird because my schedule was off. I wanted to lie down for a minute and clear my head. When I got to my room, something hit me right away. My singlet was laid out on the chair next to the bed. Neat, like someone had set it there on purpose. I didn't remember unpacking it. I was almost positive I hadn't opened my bag at all. I walked over to my duffel and unzipped it. Everything inside was folded. Not just folded like it had shifted. Folded like someone had taken everything out, refolded it, and put it back in the exact right order. My headgear was in there with the straps already adjusted to how I wear them. That's not something anyone else would know. My body felt wrong, too. Exhausted in a way sleep doesn't fix. My shoulders were sore. My hands felt tight, like they do after a match when you've been gripping and fighting wrists for 6 minutes. My neck had that stiff ache from collar ties. I stood there in the quiet room, holding my headgear, trying to make it make sense. Maybe I had been half asleep and unpacked without thinking. Maybe I was just stressed. I lay down anyway. I didn't even mean to fall asleep. I was staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of the act, trying to slow my breathing. Then I blinked. That's the only way I can describe it. It didn't feel like drifting off. It felt like one moment I was awake and the next moment I wasn't, like someone had cut out the hours in between. My alarm went off. The room looked brighter, like morning light. I grabbed my phone, 7 neuro. A full night had passed. But my body didn't feel rested. It felt like I had been doing something all night. My joints ached, my legs were heavy. I looked out the window. The parking lot was full. The same bus from yesterday was sitting out front, idling like it had never been turned off. When I stepped into the hallway, a couple of my teammates were already walking toward the stairs. Nobody looked sleepy. Nobody said anything like, "Man, I slept weird," or did anyone else have crazy dreams. It was like the night hadn't happened. Coach was downstairs waiting. When he saw me, he didn't say good morning. He didn't ask if I slept okay. He just looked at me and said, "You're up second. Be ready." That sent a cold feeling through me. Up second? We hadn't even done weigh-ins in my head. I tried to remember any part of a schedule being explained. Nothing came. The bus ride to the venue felt shorter this time. Or maybe I just stopped watching the world outside because watching it made me feel worse. Nobody talked. The whole bus was quiet except for the sound of people breathing and shifting in seats, that heavy pre-match silence. When we pulled up, the building looked normal at first. Big gym. Banners outside. People walking in. You could hear the muffled noise through the walls. But as we got off the bus and walked across the freezing parking lot, I noticed something that made everything tilt. There were no school names anywhere. No team jackets with mascots. No signs that said welcome from any city. Just weight classes and numbers. And the weights weren't in pounds, they were in kg. Inside, it was loud. Whistles, crowd noise, shoes squeaking, the slap of bodies hitting mats. It was the sound I've heard 1,000 times. For a second, it almost calmed me down, because it was familiar. Coach handed me a wristband and told me to warm up. I went to the side mats and started moving. Light jog, shots in place, sprawls, hand fighting, the usual. but my body felt like it was already past warm, like it was already tired. My legs felt heavy and slow. My shoulders burned like I'd already been pulling someone's head down all match. A ref walked past me, glanced at my wristband, and said, "Stay ready." "You missed your first already." I stopped moving. "What?" He didn't stop. He just kept walking like he had said, "Drink water," or "Tie your shoes," like it meant nothing. I looked around for Coach, but he was talking to someone near the benches. My teammates were warming up like normal. Nobody looked confused. They called my weight not long after that. They didn't say my name, just the number. Coach looked at me and nodded like that was my cue. I walked toward the mat in a kind of haze. The ref didn't ask my name, didn't check anything the way refs do at home. He just pointed me out there and waved the other guy in. I saw my opponent warming up. He looked fresh, loose shoulders, quick feet. He moved smooth like oil sliding over metal. On his sprawls, his hips didn't get all the way back, though. I noticed it right away. That's an opening I can use. Coach called from the corner, "You can tech this guy. Don't go for the pin." That sounded normal, like something he'd say in a tournament. I held on to it like a rope. Maybe I was just tired. Maybe everything else was just in my head. The ref had us shake hands. The whistle blew. I took a shot early. Clean double. Deep penetration. I drove through and finished. It felt automatic, like my body knew the exact move before my brain decided it. I could have pinned him right there, but I heard Coach's voice in my head, so I let him up. 3-0. I kept scoring. Single leg, finish, 3. Snap down, spin behind, 3. Another clean attack. He wasn't even defending badly. It just felt like I already knew what he was going to do, like I had wrestled him before and remembered the answers. The score kept climbing. I heard someone on the side say, "He's about to tech." So I pushed for it. I shot in again. This time, he dropped his level, and my head smashed straight into his. Hard. I heard the sound more than I felt it. He stumbled back, and I saw blood right away. A gash above his right eyebrow, opening fast. They stopped it for injury time. Someone came out and wrapped him up. They worked quick, like they'd done it 1,000 times. He came back to the center with a bandage tight around his head. The ref waved us on. The other guy grabbed a heavy collar tie and leaned in close. He whispered something to me in a language I didn't recognize. I'm assuming Georgian, because that's where we were supposed to be, but honestly, I don't know anymore. I shot under the tie and hit another double. Took him down. I looked up at the ref when I hit what should have been the tech number, waiting for the whistle. Nothing. We kept going. I backed up a step, confused, and said, "That's it, right?" The ref stared at me and shook his head so hard the bandage slipped loose and fell half off. He didn't even fix it. I glanced down without thinking, and in that tiny moment, the other guy shot in. I wasn't ready. He took me down. I turned, built back to base, stood up. My heart was pounding. His blood had gotten into my eyes somehow. It burned and made everything blurry on that side. Injury time. I shouted, blinking hard, "Injury time." Nobody responded. He shot again. I sprawled just in time, spun behind, broke him down, and got behind his arms. I locked my hands, twisted, and forced the turn. I slipped my hand under his armpit and rolled him into the pin. Only then did the ref stop it. He slapped the mat like it was a normal finish. No urgency. No reaction to the blood. No reaction to the fact that the match should have ended earlier. I stood up shaking, not from being tired, but from anger. I wasn't even breathing hard. I walked off the mat furious. I went straight to Coach and said, "I teched him. Why didn't they stop it?" Coach looked at me like he didn't understand the words. Then he said, simple and flat, "You finished it." Like that was the whole goal. Like it didn't matter how you got there. only that you ended it the right way. Then he started talking to me about positions like it was a normal match review, like I had messed up a turn or given up an angle. I tried to explain that the ref had ignored the tech, that the score didn't make sense, that something was wrong. Coach just nodded like he had heard it all before. Not like he agreed, more like he expected me to say it. I went to check the bracket board after. My name had advanced, but the score next to it didn't match anything that had just happened. It said I won 6-4. No tech, no pin, not even close. I stood there staring at it, waiting for it to change, like maybe it was a mistake and someone would fix it. It stayed the same. I asked the kid next to me if he had seen my match. He smiled like he was being friendly and said in broken English, "Yeah, brother, close one." Then he walked away. It wasn't close, not even a little. Coach tapped my shoulder. "Stay ready. You've got one more." I didn't argue. I didn't have energy for it. I just nodded, because that's what everyone else was doing. I walked back toward the warm-up area with my hands still shaking. I tried to move, tried to reset, but every shot felt delayed, like my body was half a second behind my own thoughts. I kept feeling the impact of that headbutt. I kept seeing blood. After a minute, I walked back to the board, because I couldn't stop thinking about that 6-4. I needed it to make sense. My name was still there, same score. But now the match underneath it was filled in. I leaned in closer. Same weight, same round. It wasn't just my name advancing. It was a new pairing. Me versus the same kid I had just wrestled. I stared at it, waiting for my brain to correct it. It didn't. My stomach dropped like I'd missed a step on stairs. I turned around, scanning the gym. He was already walking toward the mat. He wasn't sweating. His bandage was gone. The cut above his eyebrow looked clean, like it had never happened. His face looked fresh, calm, like he hadn't been through anything. The ref saw me standing there and blew the whistle sharp and loud, then pointed at me like I was late. "You're up," he said. Like I hadn't just finished the match, like I hadn't just pinned him, like none of it had happened. I walked back out there. I don't even remember deciding to. I was so angry and so confused that my body just moved. We shook hands again. His hand felt warm and dry. Normal. The whistle blew, and it felt exactly the same. Like the match had restarted from a saved file. I went straight at him. We tied up. I snapped him down hard and spun behind. He popped back up too easily, like he had done it before, like he knew the timing. I got to a body lock and lifted, because I wanted to end it fast this time. I didn't want to get pulled into another endless match where the rules didn't count. I wanted to put him down and be done. He felt lighter than he should have, not in a "I'm stronger than him" way. In a way that felt wrong, like there wasn't enough weight in his body, like I was lifting a jacket with a person shape inside it. I tilted and brought him down. That's when it went wrong. There was a loud crack, sharp enough that I felt it in my teeth. He hit the mat and didn't move. Not a quick recoil, not a groan, nothing. Then his body went limp. For a second, I waited for him to move, because sometimes a guy gets stunned and then comes back. But he didn't. His arms lay at weird angles. His face pressed into the mat. The ref didn't rush in. He didn't wave medics. He didn't look alarmed. He just watched. Then, slowly, like he was following a routine, he walked over and tapped the mat like it was a normal pin count. I let go and stepped back, breathing hard now, because suddenly my body realized what had happened. I stared at the kid on the mat, waiting for someone to blow it dead in a different way, to call trainers, to stop the tournament. Nobody did. The kid stayed there, unmoving. I looked at the corner where his coach should be. His coach stayed seated, hands folded, watching like this was any other match. Like his wrestler hadn't just gone completely still. The ref raised my hand and pointed me off the mat like it was time to clear the space. I walked back toward the benches, and my chest felt tight, like there was a strap around it. I kept looking over my shoulder. I expected shouting. I expected panic. I expected at least a medic running out. The next match started on the same mat. I couldn't handle it. I didn't say anything to coach or my teammates. I just walked toward the side doors and pushed through them. Cold air hit my face. The parking lot outside was quiet. The sky looked flat and pale. The same bus was idling near the curb like it had been waiting for me specifically. In the distance, those gray buildings sat in rows, silent and identical. I bent over with my hands on my knees, trying to breathe. My lungs wouldn't relax. I kept seeing it again and again, the crack, the limp body, the way the ref had acted like nothing happened. The door behind me opened. Two men in plain clothes stepped out. No team jackets, no tournament staff badges. Just simple dark clothing like they were trying not to stand out. They didn't look at me, and they didn't speak to each other. They carried the kid out between them. It didn't look careful. It didn't look like an emergency response. It looked like moving equipment, like hauling a heavy bag. The kid's head lolled. His arms hung down. He looked smaller now, like the life had been taken out of him, and all that was left was weight. They walked straight past me, not even a glance, and went to a black Escalade parked near the curb. No plates. One of them opened the back. They lifted the kid and put him inside. Not gently, not like a person, like gear. Then they shut the door. I stood there for a long time after that, waiting for someone to come out yelling questions, waiting for my coach to burst through the door and demand to know where I was going, waiting for a cop car, waiting for anything that fit reality. Nothing happened. Nobody came out looking for him. Nobody came out looking for me. Eventually, I forced myself to move because I didn't know what else to do. I walked back to the bus because that was the only familiar object in the whole place. When I got on, everyone was sitting quietly like they had been the whole day. Nobody looked at me like I had done something terrible. Nobody asked why I left the gym. Nobody asked about the match. It was like it had been erased. I'm sitting here typing this with my phone in my hands, and I feel like if I stop, I'm going to forget what I saw. Like the memory will slide away, and I'll start acting like them. Like I'll start nodding and following and pretending the gaps aren't there. I tried looking up Adzar again. Still nothing. I tried different spellings. I tried searching the airport name. I tried searching the tournament itself. The only thing that comes up is the stuff on my phone that was already there before we landed. Anything connected to this place, to this country, to this tournament, doesn't exist. I even tried translating the word Adzar in different languages. My phone doesn't recognize it as anything. It acts like it's not a real word. But I'm here. We're all here. And after what happened on that mat, after watching a kid go limp and seeing nobody react, I can't shake this feeling that this isn't a normal trip that went off schedule. This feels like we ended up somewhere we weren't supposed to find. Somewhere that doesn't want to be named. I don't know what I'm supposed to do now. I don't know who I can even ask without getting that same blank look. The same calm voice telling me the answer is already right in front of me. Has anyone ever heard of this place? Has anyone ever been somewhere that doesn't exist online? Somewhere that answers questions like you're not allowed to ask them? Because I'm starting to think we're not supposed to leave. Story 1. I drop my heavy bag and stop in the still night air, pulling in one sharp, clean breath. I don't move for a moment. I just listen. The forest has a way of sounding empty, even when it isn't. The wind can die without warning. Birds can go silent. Insects can stop as if they've all agreed at once that now isn't the time. I've learned that the absence of sound can be louder than anything else out here. I stand there anyway, letting my instincts do what my ears can't. Feeling for motion, for pressure, for that sense you get when something is close but hidden, when your body knows before your mind does. When nothing jumps out at me, I bend, collect my things, and keep walking up the trail. I used to think I was the scariest thing in these woods. That thought makes me want to laugh now, but I can't. Not because it's funny, because it's humiliating. Because it was the kind of belief you only hold when you don't yet understand what the world can contain. I was wrong. Not a little wrong. Not harmlessly wrong. Catastrophically wrong. And I'd give almost anything to go back and choose again. To turn around before I ever stepped onto this path. To not set any of it in motion. But there's no undoing it. There's no reset. The only way forward is exactly what it's always been. Forward. Until the consequences catch up. And finally, wrap their hands around my throat. I've been messing around with forces I don't understand and calling it cleverness. And now the find out part of that old saying is coming toward me at full speed. Because this arrangement, this stupid, convenient arrangement, was never going to last. Deals with the devil don't. Even if you try to dress them up as something practical, something controlled, something you can manage. My discovery had seemed like luck at first, the kind of solution that makes you feel grateful in a grim way. I had a problem, and suddenly I had a way to make that problem disappear. My mother used to say that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. She said it with this tired certainty, like she'd learned it the hard way. I should have listened. I press on through the forest, placing each foot down with purpose. Not fast, not frantic. Confident, deliberate. Never show fear. The forest feeds on it. The trail is familiar to me, but familiarity doesn't make it safe. Familiarity is what gets people killed. It makes you stop paying attention. It makes you assume you know what you're dealing with. It makes you forget that the woods can change without needing a reason. The trees around me stand close together, their trunks dark and straight, their branches reaching overhead like fingers. Tonight the moon is bright enough to give everything a thin silver edge, but not bright enough to make anything truly clear. Shadows overlap in layers. Depth becomes hard to judge. A stump can look like a crouched figure if you glance at it wrong. A dip in the ground can look like something moving if your eyes catch it at the wrong angle. I force myself to keep my breathing steady. I tell myself I'm in control. I tell myself I've done this before. But my shoulders stay tight anyway. After a while, I reach a tree stump, old, low, and twisted. I've passed it many times. It should feel like a marker that tells me I'm close. Instead, it makes me stop. Something about it looks different tonight. I step closer and study it with suspicion. The stump is wizened, gnarled, its surface worn like it's been rubbed down over years of rain and sun. But there's a crack running through it, blackened and jagged, splitting it unevenly. Was that crack always there? I can't remember. That's what scares me. I know this trail. I know the shape of it, the pace, the landmarks. I should remember. Maybe it's new. Maybe lightning hit it. Maybe the stump rotted and split naturally. Or maybe it's another sign that this place is changing. I glare at the stump the way you glare at something that won't explain itself, then move past it. The feeling in my gut deepens as I walk, not because anything has happened, but because my body is already preparing for what's coming. My bag pulls at my shoulder. It feels heavier than it did when I left the car. It shouldn't. It's the same bag, the same weight. But it drags. Finally, I let it slip lower until it scrapes the ground. The moss underfoot is thick enough to muffle the sound of the fabric dragging, damp enough to swallow noise. A few more minutes and I reach the clearing. It's open, ringed by trees, the moonlight spilling into it like pale water. In the center, the grass looks flattened in places, darker where the ground stays wet. The air feels cooler here, but also closer, like the clearing is a pocket in the woods where everything is held in. I step into the open and drop the bag in the center. Then I retreat immediately to the tree line. I don't like being out in the open, not here. The clearing is where it happens, and being in the center of it feels like standing on a stage with your back to the audience. Tonight something feels off. I can't name it, but it's there. A pressure, a wrongness in the air. My instincts are sharp enough that I've survived this long. They've never failed me yet. They're screaming now in a way they usually don't. Despite the posture I've been forcing, despite the calm face, the steady breathing, a chill creeps over my skin. Then I hear it. Still far away, but coming. Something moving fast through brush and low branches, not caring what it breaks. It crashes through the undergrowth like a heavy animal, and the sound of it is so wrong that my stomach clenches. I roll my shoulders back, trying to shake out tension, trying to look like I'm not prey. It gets closer. The noises it makes aren't just footsteps. They're wet, thick, full of something that makes my throat tighten. Phlegmy snarls. A choking sort of breath. The kind of sound you hear from something sick, something starving, something that wants to tear into whatever it finds. My body reacts without permission. My heart hits hard against my ribs. My hands go cold even though my face feels hot. I can't tell if I'm panicking because of the creature itself or if it gives off something, some signal, some pressure that triggers fear like a chemical release. I've felt it before. Every time. Like standing too close to a power line and feeling your skin hum. And then it enters the clearing. It's a mass of darkness moving against darkness, large enough that the moonlight doesn't sit on it the way it should. It doesn't have a clear outline. It's not an animal exactly. Not a bear, not a wolf, not anything that fits into the shapes your brain expects. But it moves with purpose. Something like a claw, long, black, wrong, reaches out and hooks into the bag. The bag jerks. Then it tears open. The contents spill out onto the grass. Even after everything, even after what I've done, I still hate that part. The sight of it, the idea of it, the weight of what it means. The creature snarls again, eager, and then its body shifts forward, blocking my view as it lowers itself over the offering. For that, at least, I'm grateful. I don't want to see the details. I've seen enough. The sounds, though, the sounds I can't escape. Wet crunching, tearing, the horrible, steady rhythm of feeding. I stare at one patch of thick, matted fur, forcing my eyes to stay fixed so I don't imagine worse shapes in the darkness. I try to ignore what's happening beneath that fur. I try to keep my breathing controlled. This was always the deal. I bring it what I need gone. The forest takes it. No trace. No evidence left behind. A solution to a problem I created with my own hands. A disgusting convenience. I told myself it was practical. I told myself it was cleaner than alternatives. I told myself I was smart for finding it. And the forest accepted it. For a while. After several long minutes, the sounds stop. Relief loosens my chest, just slightly. Almost done, I think. Almost over. There's still work ahead, cleaning, wiping out digital traces, destroying a phone, deleting footage if I have to. That part is exhausting. But it's understandable. It's human. It's something I know how to do. This part, the part where I wait in the trees for something that should not exist, that part is what has been eating at me slowly, night after night. And then It happens. The creature rises. It unfurls itself from where it had been low to the ground and straightens, stretching to a height that makes my skin prickle. It's still monstrous, still wrong, but as it stands there in the moonlight, I feel a sudden shock of recognition. Not of what it is, but of what it's becoming. It looks different, not fully, not clearly, but there's a suggestion of something more upright, more balanced, a shape that isn't only animal hunger and muscle, something that, for the first time, reminds me of a person. Instinct makes me step back. It's pointless. The trees aren't protection here. This is its home. The forest isn't shelter from it. The forest belongs to it. I can't see eyes. I never have. Not the way you see eyes on an animal. But I feel its attention lock onto me. I feel it like heat, like pressure on the skin. I step back again, breath growing shallow. And then the creature speaks. You will bring more. The voice is low enough I feel it in my bones. It's not a normal voice. The words come slowly, like something forcing language into a mouth built for other things. Stilted, labored, like it's learning. But the meaning is clear. My blood turns cold. It could speak. It never spoke before. It never needed to. This arrangement worked because it was simple. Because it was animal logic. Food appears, it eats, it leaves. No demands, no bargaining, no escalation. Now it's making demands. I nod without thinking. I don't trust my voice to work. I don't trust myself not to say something wrong. The creature holds its attention on me for several seconds. It feels like being assessed, like being measured, like it's deciding how useful I am. Then it turns and moves away, crossing the clearing with heavy steps and slipping back into the trees. The clearing is left empty except for a dark stain at the center of the grass. I stand there frozen for too long, trying to understand what just happened. My mind feels like it's spinning, trying to catch something solid and failing, because this changes everything. I turn and start moving back down the trail, faster now. Not running, but close. I can feel cold sweat gathering at the base of my neck. The air in my lungs tastes sharp and bitter. What was I going to do? This worked because it didn't ask for anything. Because it didn't want more than I gave. Because it didn't pull me deeper. Now, it's pulling. And if it's changing, if it's starting to resemble something human, then what does that mean? The thought hits me so suddenly I almost gag. Is it becoming more human because of what I've been feeding it? Because I haven't been bringing it deer carcasses or roadkill or scraps of normal forest life. I've been bringing it meat that used to be people. I've been bringing it the aftermath of my own crimes. And maybe that matters. Maybe what something eats shapes what it becomes. I keep walking, mind racing ahead of my steps. If it keeps learning, if it keeps improving, what happens when it doesn't need me anymore? What happens when it can hunt for itself? What happens when it learns how to come closer without being heard? I think of my mother's warning again and feel like an idiot for ignoring it. After what feels like forever, I break through the trees and see the dirt road. My car is parked on the verge, a dark shape against the pale dust. Relief hits me so hard my legs almost shake. I reach the car and turn for one last look at the forest. That's when I see it. The creature is there at the tree line. It followed me. It stands half hidden among the trees, still dark, still wrong. I can't see eyes, but I know it's watching. The way you know you're being watched, even when you can't prove it. And there's something else in the feeling now. Something that almost resembles amusement, like it's enjoying my fear. I stand there stunned, realizing something that should have occurred to me earlier. My whole walk back, I heard nothing. No crashing through undergrowth, no heavy pursuit. So either it can move silently, or it didn't need to hurry. My hands fumble for my keys. I drop them. Metal hits dirt with a small clink that sounds impossibly loud. I crouch, grab them, straighten, and movement catches my eye to the left. There's another one. My throat closes. My brain refuses to accept it at first. I blink hard, as if blinking can erase what's there. But it doesn't. A branch cracks on the right. I whip my head toward the sound, and my heart seems to lurch into my throat. More movement, all along the tree line. Shapes stepping forward into the thin moonlight, not fully revealed, but clear enough. Tall, thin, twisted, human in outline, but not human in presence. There aren't two, there are many. They stand there silently watching me, lined up like shadows that learned how to hold still. My mind finally catches up, and the truth hits with sick clarity. All this time I thought I'd been feeding one creature, one problem, one mouth. But I haven't been feeding one. I've been feeding an army. And worse, without meaning to, without understanding, I've been teaching them, feeding them the kind of meat that carries the imprint of humanity, giving them time and practice, letting them grow closer to the shape of their prey. I throw myself into the car. The door slams. I lock it without thinking. My hands shake so badly it takes 2 tries to get the key turned. The engine starts. I hit the gas and peel off the verge so fast the tires spit dirt. In my rearview mirror, the tree line is just darkness and thin, pale trunks. But I can still feel them watching, hungry, learning. And now that they've learned my pattern, now that they've learned I'm the one who brings food, I don't think they're going to let me stop. Story 3. A few weeks ago, a patient came into my practice with behavior that didn't match what I usually see, even in someone with a brain tumor. He was in his early 20s, quiet, polite, and looked healthy in that plain, forgettable way some young people do. The story around him was what stood out. His parents came with him and did most of the talking at first. They looked exhausted, like they hadn't slept well in weeks, and they kept trading glances as if they were scared of saying the wrong thing in front of him. According to them, their son had been completely normal until recently. No history of mental illness, no drug use that they knew about, no head injuries. He had been a little introverted, maybe, but nothing alarming. Then, over only a month or two, he changed so much that they said it felt like someone had replaced him. They weren't describing small mood shifts. They talked about how his food preferences flipped overnight. He had always hated spicy food, they said, and suddenly he was putting hot sauce on everything. His speech changed, too. The words he chose, the rhythm of his sentences, even his tone. His mother said there were moments where she would close her eyes and listen to him in another room and feel certain she was hearing a stranger. Then there were the clothes. His father described it like this. He dresses like he's copying someone. Their son had always worn plain jeans and hoodies, the same safe style he'd had since high school. Now he was wearing button-down shirts he'd never owned before, colors he used to avoid, shoes his parents didn't remember buying. When they asked where he got them, he'd smile like the question was funny and say, "You worry too much." It was hard for me to measure any of it in the exam room. I hadn't known him before, so I didn't have a before version to compare. And in front of me, he looked calm. He made eye contact. He answered questions without confusion. He didn't ramble. He didn't seem like someone lost in delusions. If his parents hadn't been there with that haunted look on their faces, I might have assumed this was just a young man with a stressed family. But they kept pushing. They talked about angry episodes that sounded like storms, not ordinary arguments. They said he would snap over nothing, shouting with a kind of focus that frightened them, like he wasn't just mad, but committed to being mad. His father said their son once stared at him for almost a full minute after an argument, not blinking, and then said, in a flat voice, "You don't get to tell me what to do anymore." That sentence alone wasn't strange, but the way he said it, according to them, was wrong. Like it wasn't teenage rebellion, like it was a warning. Because of those reports, I did what I always do when something doesn't fit. I ordered a full workup, blood tests, neuro exam, and imaging. The scans didn't surprise me at all. He had a meningioma. It wasn't the largest I'd ever seen, but it was positioned in a way that mattered. It was pressing against areas of the frontal lobe, the part of the brain that helps control personality, impulse, judgment, and emotional responses. Personality changes are common with frontal lobe pressure. I've seen patients become irritable, depressed, reckless, unusually calm, unusually angry. Families often say, "He just isn't himself." That phrase is almost routine in neurosurgery. What wasn't routine was how total the change sounded in this case. His parents weren't describing one or two traits shifting. They were describing a complete rewrite, like the tumor had edited everything about him at once. Still, I felt confident. A meningioma is often benign. Many can be removed safely. And when the pressure comes off the brain, the person usually comes back to themselves, at least partly. I explained the risks, the plan, the likely outcome. I said the words families cling to, "This is treatable." At first, the young man was friendly enough in appointments. He smiled at the right times, he nodded, he joked lightly. He had the kind of polite attitude that makes a doctor's job easier. But once the tumor was identified and we started planning surgery, something in him turned toward me. It didn't happen all at once. It was more like a slow cooling. His answers became shorter. His eyes stayed on me a second too long. He stopped smiling. There were moments where I'd say something simple, like, "We'll take good care of you," and his mouth would twitch as if he was holding back a laugh. During a pre-op consultation, he leaned forward in his chair and spoke quietly, almost gently. "You're making a big mistake," he said. I looked at him, waiting for more, expecting fear. Many patients get scared when surgery becomes real. They push back, they bargain, they ask for other options. But his expression wasn't fear. It was irritation, like I was a child touching something I shouldn't. "You'd better leave me alone," he added. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'd dealt with angry patients before. I dealt with confused patients, aggressive patients, frightened patients. This felt different, but I couldn't put a name to it. "If I leave you alone," I said, "this tumor will continue to grow. It will cause more damage. It can take over your ability to function. It can affect your movement, speech, everything. It can eventually kill you." His hands tightened on the chair arms. His face went red fast, like a match struck. "That's what I want," he shouted. The outburst was sharp enough that his parents flinched. His mother's eyes filled with tears like she'd heard that sentence before. Maybe she had. He didn't stand up. He didn't swing at anyone. He didn't throw anything. He just sat there, gripping the chair like it was the only thing keeping him from doing something worse. Then, as quickly as it came, the anger settled, leaving him staring at me with a strange calm. Soon enough, the consultation ended. I documented what happened. I told myself it was the tumor, the pressure, the stress. I'd seen tumors cause paranoia and hostility. I reminded myself to focus on what I could control, which was the surgery. On the day of the procedure, his instability was impossible to ignore. The moment the nurses tried to bring him to pre-op, he began fighting. Not panicking, not crying, not begging. Fighting. He lashed out at staff with a kind of wild strength that sometimes appears in terrified patients. But his face didn't look terrified. It looked furious and determined. It was like he had one simple goal: stop us from putting him under. We tried verbal calming. We tried explaining. We tried bringing in his parents. Nothing worked. It got to the point that we had to sedate him before we could safely administer general anesthesia. Once he was asleep, the room changed. The chaos turned into routine. Everyone fell into their roles. Prep, drape, disinfect. The monitors beeped in the steady language of controlled medicine. I stood over the patient and did what I have done so many times that my hands know it the way a musician knows a familiar song. The beginning of the procedure was normal. Incision, access, bone flap, exposure, step by step. It wasn't until I reached the tumor that something started to feel wrong. Not in a dramatic way. Not like an alarm going off, more like a quiet sense that the usual rules were bending slightly. As I began working around the mass, I had this distinct sensation that something was pressing back against my instruments. It's hard to describe to someone who hasn't operated. Tissue has a certain feel. Even abnormal tissue has a feel. There's resistance, but it's passive. You push and it yields. You cut and it separates. It doesn't respond. This felt like response, not a muscle twitch or a reflex. More like, for a fraction of a second, the pressure changed in a way that made me think something moved. From my angle, I couldn't see the deepest part directly, but we had imaging guidance on the screen. For a moment, and then again, it almost looked like the mass shifted in a way that didn't match my hand motion. Like it wasn't just being moved, like it was moving. I noticed it once or twice. Not enough to call the surgery off. Not enough to say anything that would make the room tense. I've learned that if you speak every strange thought out loud, you poison the air with fear. You make the team second-guess their hands. You invite mistakes. So I kept going. I adjusted my approach. I focused on clean dissection. I reminded myself that optics can be misleading on a screen. Fluids shift, angles distort. Tiny movements can look big. Otherwise, the surgery was unremarkable. The tumor came out. Bleeding was controlled. The brain tissue looked better once the pressure was relieved. The numbers on the monitors stayed stable. At one point, I even made small talk with the team. I mentioned I had tickets for a baseball game later that night. Someone made a joke about hoping the game was less stressful than the surgery. We laughed. That kind of conversation happens all the time in operating rooms. It isn't disrespect. It's one way people stay steady while doing work that requires steady hands. We closed him up, secured everything, and moved him to recovery. The case should have ended there. It should have become one of those stories you barely remember months later. Just another patient whose life got better because of a routine removal. I was interested in how the surgery would affect his behavior, so as soon as I heard he was awake, I went to see him. He was still groggy, his eyes heavy, his face pale in the hospital lighting. But it was immediately clear that something had changed. He looked at me with confusion instead of anger. His voice sounded different when he spoke. Not just softer because of anesthesia, but different in shape, like the way he formed words had changed. Even the small movements of his hands, the way he shifted in bed, the way he reacted to my presence, it felt like I was talking to someone else. Most importantly, there was no threat in him. No sharpness. No warning in the eyes. "How are you feeling?" I asked. He blinked slowly. "My head hurts," he said, and gave a weak smile that looked real. "Did it go okay?" I asked him if he remembered anything from before surgery, if he'd been scared. He seemed embarrassed and said he didn't remember much. His parents came in not long after, and his mother started crying the moment he spoke to her. She kept touching his hand as if she needed proof he was there. I walked out of recovery feeling something close to relief. I told myself we'd done it. Pressure off the frontal lobe. Personality coming back. A success story. I sent the tumor specimen to pathology for biopsy, finished my shift, and went to the baseball game like I'd promised myself I would. Under stadium lights, with noise and cold drinks and the normal world around me, the strange moments in the operating room felt far away. My mind tried to file them away as imagination, stress, nothing. The next morning, the threats began. When I arrived at work, I saw it before I even reached my office. The words were scratched into my door, deep enough that you could see the raw material underneath the paint. You're dead. For a second, I just stood there, staring, trying to decide if I was really seeing it. Hospitals are busy places. People walk by, staff talk. Someone laughed down the hall. The world kept moving like nothing had happened. I called security. I called administration. Administration called the police. They took photos. They asked me questions. Did I have enemies? Was I in a dispute with a patient? Had I received threats before? Was I going through a divorce? Did I owe money? Had I made any public statements? My answers were all the same. No, no, no. My entire morning disappeared into forms and phone calls. I tried to stay calm and professional, but the truth is, I was shaken. Threats are different when they're specific and placed where you work. It's not like a random angry email you can delete. This was carved into a door someone had to stand in front of in a hospital and take the time to scratch into place. For a little while, I convinced myself it was a prank. Maybe a resident with a twisted sense of humor. Maybe a bored staff member. Maybe someone trying to scare me for reasons that would make sense once I knew them. That illusion lasted until I checked my email. There was a message from an unknown sender. No name, no normal subject line. The body of the email contained the same words, repeated over and over until it looked like a wall of hatred. You're dead, you're dead, you're dead. Hundreds of times, no punctuation, no explanation. Just that sentence, stacked like someone had been hammering it into the screen. More calls followed, more reports. My phone rang with numbers I didn't recognize. When I answered, there was silence, then breathing, then a click. One voicemail was just a low whisper repeating the words like a chant. Another was only static, but beneath it I thought I heard a voice trying to form my name. Each new thing made it harder to pretend it was nothing. By midday, a cold realization settled in my chest. Someone, somewhere, truly wanted me dead. I thought about leaving work immediately, going home, taking the back roads, locking every door. But I also knew that if someone was willing to carve threats into a hospital door, they could find me anywhere. At least at work there were cameras, guards, other people. Half the building already knew something was going on. So I stayed, even though I felt like I was walking around with a target on my back. After lunch, there was a knock on my office door. For the first time all day, it was a normal sound, like something from my old life. I looked up expecting a nurse or an administrator. Instead, it was Hannah, our resident pathologist. I'd always liked Hannah. She was smart, a little quiet, and had the kind of steady presence you want in a hospital. She didn't gossip much. She didn't dramatize. She did her work and did it well. Her showing up in person was unusual, though. Pathology results usually come through the system or via a quick message. Face-to-face meant the tumor had something interesting or something concerning. She asked if she could come in. She smiled as she stepped inside and closed the door behind her. In her hands was a folder, held neatly against her chest. She laid it on my desk like it was heavy. The specimen you sent down yesterday, she said, was unlike anything I've ever seen before. My mind jumped back to those moments in the OR, the feeling of pressure against my instruments, the image of the mass shifting. I kept my face neutral. How so? I asked. Hannah opened the folder, But she didn't look down at it. She looked at me. "I've been unable to identify it," she said. "It doesn't fit any known tissue classifications. It's wrong." She hesitated, like she was choosing how much to admit. "There's something else." My stomach tightened. "What is it?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she asked, "Can you show me your notes from the surgery?" In the moment, I didn't question the request. It was strange, yes, because I was right there and could explain anything she wanted. But my brain was already overloaded from the threats. And now this. I just wanted clarity. I just wanted someone to tell me the weirdness had a medical explanation. So I turned to my computer and began searching for the operative report and my notes. For a few seconds, we sat in silence. The only sound was my keyboard clicking, the soft hum of the computer fan, the distant hospital noises outside the door. I had nearly found the document when Hannah spoke again, her tone casual, as if we were chatting by the coffee machine. "How was the baseball game?" she asked. My fingers stopped mid-typing. "It was," I began, and then I froze completely. I had never told her about the baseball game. I remembered the or conversation. I remembered exactly when I said it, to my team, while my patient's skull was open. Hannah hadn't been there. She shouldn't have known. Slowly, I lifted my eyes from the screen. Hannah was standing in the same place, but everything about her felt different. The smile was gone. Her face was tight with rage, twisted in a way that didn't look like her at all. Her eyes were wide and focused, not on me as a person, but on me as a problem. That's when I saw what she was holding at her side. A scalpel. For a second, my mind refused to connect the image with reality. A scalpel belongs in an operating room, on a tray, counted and tracked. Not in an office, not in someone's hand like a weapon. "You should have left me alone," she shouted. Then she lunged forward, coming across my desk with surprising speed, swinging the scalpel in sharp, frantic arcs. In moments like that, time does strange things. Everything becomes too loud and too quiet at once. My body moved before my mind caught up. I threw up my arms and grabbed at her wrists, trying to turn the blade away from my face, away from my throat. The terrifying thing about a scalpel is how easily it cuts. You don't feel the first slice the way you expect to. There's no movie-style pain. There's just a sudden warmth, and then you see red spreading across fabric. We struggled. Papers flew off my desk. My chair hit the wall. I could hear my own breath, short and sharp, and Hannah's voice, low and furious, repeating the same sentence as if it was the only thing she knew how to say. "You should have left me alone." I tried to shout for help, but it came out broken. Still, someone outside must have heard. Or maybe they'd been watching. I don't know. The door opened hard, and security rushed in. It took multiple men to pull her off me. Even then, she fought like she didn't care what happened to her body. She twisted and kicked and tried to reach for me even while they restrained her. Her face wasn't panicked. It wasn't human fear. It was pure anger, almost righteous, like she believed she was correcting something. I was rushed to the emergency department to get my wounds cleaned and stitched. They weren't deep enough to kill me, but deep enough to leave scars. As the staff worked on me, I kept thinking the same thought again and again, and each time it came, it felt more solid. Hannah had asked about the baseball game. Hannah had never been in the OR. The only people who heard me mention it were my surgical team and my patient, unconscious on the table with his skull open. I tried to push the thought away because it sounded insane, because it didn't fit any part of the world I understood. But it kept returning, sharper each time. When I finally convinced the ER to let me leave, I didn't go home. I didn't go back to my office. I walked, fast, down to the pathology wing, ignoring the stairs, ignoring the pain pulling at my stitches. I asked where the specimen from yesterday was being stored. Someone pointed me toward the refrigerated units where samples were kept before disposal or further testing. The hallway lights buzzed faintly. The air felt colder there, and everything smelled like disinfectant and metal. After a little searching, I found the container labeled with my patient's information, the one that should have held the mass I removed with my own hands. I opened it. It was empty. Story 2. I was on my knees in my backyard when I came to. Mud was stuck to my jeans, my hands, my cheeks. It was early enough that the air still felt cold and damp, and the grass was slick under my shins. For a second, I just stared down at what I was holding, like my brain was still loading the scene. A fistful of wet dirt sat in my palm, dark and shiny, packed together like paste. My hand was already moving toward my face, steady and automatic, like it had one job and didn't care if I was awake to understand it. I got the dirt in my mouth before the disgust hit. Ugh, what the hell? I choked, instantly gagging. I spit mud and saliva into the grass and wiped my tongue with the back of my sleeve. What the fuck am I doing? I spun my head left and right, heart hammering, waiting to see someone staring over a fence or a neighbor stepping outside with their coffee. No one was out. No voices. No footsteps. Just the quiet buzz of morning. I got to my feet too fast, dizzy, and hurried inside like I'd been caught doing something illegal. I went straight to the bathroom, turned on the sink, and started scrubbing my hands and face. Brown water ran down the drain. I rinsed my mouth again and again until the taste faded. But the feeling didn't. My skin still crawled with it. I kept replaying the last night. I remembered going to bed. I remembered lying down. Everything was normal. And then I woke up with dirt in my mouth, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Work had been stressful, sure, but stress didn't make you eat your backyard. I stared at myself in the mirror for a long minute. My eyes looked wrong, not in a horror movie way, just tired, like I hadn't really slept in weeks. I told myself I must have sleepwalked. Maybe I'd had some kind of weird dream and acted it out. That was embarrassing, but not impossible. I showered, got dressed, and forced myself into the day. My life had been stuck on repeat for as long as I could remember. Wake up, work, push through the hours, stay late, go home, collapse, and do it again. Ever since graduation, it felt like everything I did was for someone else's approval. I was an intern, which meant I worked twice as hard just to be treated like I wasn't invisible. The only real break I'd gotten was this house. My grandparents had lived here until they passed, and when everything was settled, it became mine. It wasn't fancy, but it was close to the office. No rent, no roommate, no long commute. On paper, it was perfect. In real life, it just meant I was alone a lot, and tired a lot, and that no one was around to tell me when I was doing something insane. That first day after the dirt, I tried to act normal. I sat through meetings, answered emails, smiled at the right times. I kept thinking I'd suddenly remember getting out of bed and walking outside, like my brain was holding the memory back and would finally let it go. It never did. By the time I got home, I was running on fumes. I dropped my bag, kicked my shoes off, and let myself sink into the couch with the TV on, more for noise than anything else. The house creaked the way old houses do, settling and shifting, and normally that sound was comforting. That night, it felt like the place was breathing. I fell asleep without meaning to. My eyes closed. The TV voices blurred. My body finally gave up. Then I opened my eyes and I wasn't on the couch anymore. I was outside on the front porch, bent over the window box. My jaw was working. I could feel something stringy between my teeth, and when I pulled back, I saw torn leaves stuck to my lips. I was chewing the plants. The moment awareness snapped in, panic followed. Oh my God, fuck. I spat out bits of leaves, wiping my mouth hard. What the hell is wrong with me? I jerked my head up, scanning the street. It was empty. No cars passing, no porch lights turning on, no one walking a dog. Just quiet and the faint hum of distant traffic. The whole neighborhood looked asleep. I backed inside, shut the door, and pressed my forehead against it for a second, like they could hold me together. Then I walked to bed like nothing had happened, like I could pretend this was just a fluke and not the start of something. In bed, my brain refused to shut off. I turned from one side to the other, staring into the dark. Twice now, I'd woken up doing things I didn't choose, things I didn't remember starting. It wasn't like forgetting where you put your keys. It felt like losing time, like someone else was borrowing my body when I wasn't looking. Eventually, exhaustion dragged me down. It couldn't have been long before I snapped awake again, but this time I wasn't in bed. I was standing in the kitchen, in the dark, with the fridge light glowing against the counter. My mouth was full. My teeth were biting down on something that didn't belong there, something that crinkled and resisted. I gagged, grabbed at my lips, and realized what I was chewing. Aluminum foil, parchment paper, a plastic bag. The dish sponge was on the counter with deep tooth marks in it, like someone had tried to take a bite out of it. I pulled a rubber dish glove out of my throat, and it came up slow, wet, and half swallowed. Jesus Christ, I whispered, shaking. Not again. Come on. I ran to the bathroom on pure fear. If I'd swallowed any of it, it could tear something, choke me, poison me. My mind filled with awful images. Doctors pulling sharp plastic out of my stomach, an ambulance in the driveway, my coworkers hearing about me like I was some kind of freak. I shoved my fingers down my throat and threw up hard. Nothing came up, just bile and spit. I stared at the toilet, gasping, waiting for the foil or the plastic or anything to appear. It didn't. It was like my stomach was empty, like I hadn't put any of it in my mouth at all. I rinsed my mouth and leaned on the sink, hands trembling. The more I tried to make sense of it, the less it fit. You couldn't chew a dish glove and then have nothing in your stomach. You couldn't wake up with garbage between your teeth and then vomit nothing. I left the bathroom, still wiping my mouth, and that's when I saw it. The basement door was cracked open. What the fuck? Why is this open? I snapped, louder than I meant to. I walked over and slammed it shut so hard the frame rattled. I didn't even remember going near the basement. I rarely went down there at all. It was unfinished and cluttered and had that smell old basements get, damp and stale. Still, seeing the door open made my skin go cold, like the house had been caught with its mouth open. I went back to bed angry and scared, and it took forever to fall asleep. My whole body felt restless, like something inside me wasn't ready to stop moving. The next thing I knew, sunlight was burning through my eyelids. I was standing on the stairs, halfway between floors, with my hands gripping the railing. My teeth were scraping wood. I pulled back with a jolt and tasted splinters. I spit into my palm and saw tiny pieces of the handrail stuck to my saliva. The railing had fresh marks in it, pale grooves where my teeth had bitten through the finish. I just stood there, breathing hard, staring at the damage like it belonged to someone else. That day at work was brutal. I was exhausted, but I tried to hide it the way everyone does, like being tired is some kind of moral failure. My jaw ached every time I opened my mouth. My teeth throbbed, and my tongue felt scraped raw. I didn't eat lunch. I couldn't. It wasn't only the pain. I was scared of my own mouth. The fear felt stupid when I tried to explain it to myself, but it didn't go away. I kept imagining myself in the break room, unwrapping a sandwich, and then suddenly snapping, reaching for a stapler instead, biting down on something metal while everyone stared. The thought made my stomach twist. So I starved through the day, drinking water and coffee and pretending it was normal. When I finally got home, I was shaking with hunger. I stood in the kitchen, staring at the food in my hands like it might change. I made a sandwich slowly, almost carefully, and ate it in small bites, waiting for something to turn wrong, waiting for the bread to feel like paper or the meat to taste like chemicals. Nothing happened. It stayed a sandwich. It stayed food. That should have made me feel better. Instead, it made me realize the worst part wasn't the eating. It was the not remembering, the missing time, the way my body seemed to have its own plans once I fell asleep. As evening came, the dread started to build again. I looked at my couch and then at the hallway to my bedroom and felt my chest tighten. Sleep didn't feel like rest anymore. It felt like giving up control. So I tried to get ahead of it. I walked through the house and put anything dangerous out of reach. Cleaning supplies went into a locked cabinet. Knives went away. Anything sharp or poisonous or heavy, I moved. I felt ridiculous doing it, like I was preparing for a toddler instead of myself. But the fear made it necessary. Then I locked my bedroom door. And then, even though it made my stomach drop, I tied one of my ankles to the bed frame with a piece of twine I found in a drawer. It wasn't thick rope. It wasn't meant for restraining anyone. But I told myself it would be enough to keep me from wandering. I lay down, staring at the ceiling, and tried to breathe slowly. This time I would sleep. This time I'd wake up in bed like a normal person. The instant I drifted off, I snapped awake with a violent gasp. I was choking. My throat felt packed and swollen, like my airway was being pushed shut from the inside. I clawed at my mouth and felt fabric. I wasn't even in my bed. I was inside my bedroom closet, crammed between hanging clothes, my shoulder pressed against the door. A towel was stuffed down my throat. I gagged so hard my eyes watered. Saliva ran down my chin. I grabbed the end of the towel and started pulling. It came out slowly, inch by inch, scraping against my throat the whole way. The pain was sharp and wrong, like my body was rejecting something that should never have been there. I kept pulling, choking and coughing, until the last wet part slid free and dropped into my lap. The towel hit the closet floor with a heavy slap, soaked through. I sat there, shaking, sucking in air like I'd just come up from underwater. Then I remembered the twine. I looked down at my ankle. It was still there, but it wasn't tied. What was left of it was a wet, chewed-up mess, like an animal had gnawed through it. Little fibers stuck to my skin. I stared at it, and the anger finally broke through the fear. There was no way I was going back to sleep. At around 2 in the morning, I sat on the couch with the TV on, trying to keep my eyes open. I searched online with shaking hands, typing things like, why do I wake up eating random things and sleepwalking, but not remembering, and can you swallow stuff and not find it in your stomach? The results were useless. Stress, sleep disorders, anxiety, nothing that fit what was happening to me. No matter how hard I tried, my body started to sink anyway. My eyelids got heavy. My head nodded once, then again. I told myself I'd just rest them for a second. When I woke up, it was daylight. I was in the garage, crouched over an open bag of cement like it was a bowl of cereal. A whole handful of dry cement powder was packed into my mouth. The panic hit so fast, it made me dizzy. I gagged and spit, and gray dust burst out onto the floor in a nasty cloud. It turned into paste on my tongue the moment it touched saliva, thick and gritty. I coughed and spit again and again, wiping my mouth with my sleeve until I could breathe without tasting it. What the hell is happening to me? I said out loud, voice cracking. Then I looked at the time, and everything turned into a blur. I was already late. I rushed through my morning on autopilot, rinsing my mouth, brushing my teeth, throwing on clothes, grabbing my bag. Somehow, I got to work just in time to avoid a full disaster. I made it to my desk and tried to pretend I wasn't falling apart. "Morning, Eric," Bob said from the desk beside mine. He looked up from his screen, then paused. "You okay? You look rough." "Morning," I said, forcing my face into something like a smile. "Yeah, just slept like crap." Bob's expression shifted. He hesitated, and then he did something that made my stomach drop. He lifted his hand toward his face like he was rubbing his nose, but he kept it there, like a shield. I stared at him. Bob was not a subtle person. If he was acting subtle, it meant something was wrong. "You good, Bob?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He leaned back a little, eyes flicking toward my mouth, and then away. "Yeah," he said, voice slightly muffled by his hand. "Eric, are you sure you're okay?" "Of course," I said too fast. "Why?" He winced like he didn't want to be rude, but couldn't stop himself. "Man, I'm sorry, but your breath smells like a construction site. Like dust. What did you eat for breakfast, Screws?" He pointed vaguely toward my face. "And you've got something on the side of your lip." Heat rushed up my neck. Someone a few desks over snorted, and another person laughed under their breath like they'd been waiting for someone to say it. I mumbled something I don't even remember and went straight to the restroom. I scrubbed my teeth until my gums hurt. I rinsed. I brushed again. Then, desperate, I made myself vomit, thinking maybe the cement was sitting in my stomach like wet concrete. Almost nothing came out. I stared at the sink, spit gray water, and wiped the side of my mouth. Sure enough, there was dried cement dust clinging to my skin, like powder makeup. I cleaned it off and went back to my desk with my head down. Nobody brought it up again, mostly because we got hit with a big project and everyone went into survival mode. We stayed late. By the time I got home, it was close to 9. I collapsed on the couch without even turning on the TV this time. My body felt hollow, like it was holding itself up on nerves alone. I tried to stay awake because I was scared, but the moment I sat still, sleep pulled me under like a tide. I woke up choking. Something hard crunched between my teeth. I was in the bathroom, leaning over the sink, staring at myself in the mirror like I'd walked into the room and caught someone else there. My mouth was stretched around the thick power cord of my hairdryer. It was shoved in deep, past where it should have been possible without gagging. In my other hand, I was holding my razor, and my teeth had sunk into its plastic handle. When I jerked my head back, sharp plastic pieces broke loose and rattled into the sink. I gagged, eyes watering, and started to pull the cord out. It came out slow, slick with saliva, inch by horrible inch. My throat spasmed around it, trying to push it out and swallow at the same time, and the feeling made my whole body shudder. When it finally slid free, I leaned over the sink and coughed until I could breathe normally again. I looked at my reflection, red eyes, spit on my chin, lips swollen, and something in me hardened. This wasn't stress. This wasn't a little sleepwalking. This was turning into a way to die. I stumbled out of the bathroom and headed toward the bedroom, and on the way I saw the basement door again. It was open, not wide, just cracked, like it had been before. I slammed it shut so hard the walls vibrated. For a second, I thought I felt the whole house react, like a deep shiver through the floorboards. I stood there with my hand still on the knob, breathing hard, trying to tell myself it was just an old house settling. But the truth was, I didn't know what to believe anymore. As humiliating as it felt, I knew I needed help, real help. I woke up one morning with wood splinters in my mouth and a torn chunk missing from the edge of my living room rug, like I'd tried to eat it. That was the moment I stopped pretending this was something I could handle alone. I called in sick and worked from home, answering emails with shaking hands and jumping every time I realized I couldn't remember the last 10 minutes. Later, I drove to an appointment with a psychologist because it was the fastest thing I could get. Sitting in that office, under soft lighting, explaining that I kept waking up eating dirt and plastic and towels, I felt like I was describing someone else's life. The psychologist listened without laughing, which I appreciated more than I expected. She told me it sounded like a sleep-related eating disorder, maybe mixed with sleepwalking. She asked about stress, about my work hours, about caffeine, about anxiety. She recommended a sleep specialist. She also told me I should get checked physically, because even if it was just sleep behavior, I could have swallowed something dangerous. She mentioned an endoscopy and even a stomach flush, just to be safe. I left with pamphlets and referrals and a sick, heavy feeling in my chest. Having a label didn't make it less terrifying. If anything, it made it feel more real. I stayed home the rest of the week. Part of it was because I didn't want my coworkers to see me like this again. Part of it was fear that I'd lose my job if I kept disappearing, even though I was still an intern. I tried to keep up remotely, tried to look competent through a screen, while my nights turned into something I couldn't control. That night, I got ready for bed like I was preparing for a disaster. I followed every safety tip I'd been given. I made the room as bare as possible. I put away anything I could swallow or choke on. I locked the door. I didn't tie myself to the bed again because the towel incident made me realize how useless that was. If I could chew through twine in my sleep, I could do worse. It took forever to fall asleep. When I finally did, it didn't feel like drifting off. It felt like slipping under. When I woke up, rain was hitting my skin. I was outside. Not just outside, inside my backyard shed. The shed smelled like wet wood and old tools. The small space was cold, and my bare feet were planted on concrete slick with muddy water. My clothes clung to me, soaked through. Rain hammered the roof above my head so hard it sounded like fists. My mouth was on fire. The pain was so sharp it made my eyes go wide. I tasted metal. I tasted blood. My jaw trembled as I opened my mouth and felt something hard shifting against my tongue. Then I realized what it was, and my stomach dropped so fast I thought I'd faint. Nails. A handful of nails were in my mouth like candy. Some were wedged between my teeth. One was stuck into my tongue. Another had punched through the corner of my lip and hung there, half in and half out, as if my face had been stapled. A sound came out of me that wasn't a word. I spit frantically, and nails clattered onto the concrete floor, splashing in the muddy water. They were wet and streaked with blood. I kept spitting until my mouth was empty, until I was sure there wasn't one more piece of metal hiding in the back of my throat. Warm blood ran down my chin and into my neck. I could feel it sliding down the inside of my throat, too, and every swallow hurt. I stumbled out of the shed into the rain, half blind, shaking. The yard was a mess of dark mud and puddles. My hands were slippery with blood and water. I made it to the back door and fumbled with the handle like my fingers didn't belong to me. All I could think was that I needed an ambulance. I needed real doctors, real machines, someone to look inside me and tell me what I'd done. The muddy footprints smear near the basement door, wide, dark, dragged across the floor like someone had walked in wet and turned, barely registered. It should have, but my mind was focused on one thing, not dying in my own house. The hospital was bright and sterile and loud. They cleaned my mouth, checked for cuts, took scans, asked questions I couldn't answer. I stayed for a few days, partly because they wanted to monitor me, partly because I begged them not to send me home too soon. And during that time, nothing happened. No waking up with dirt on my face, no chewing plastic, no towels, no missing time. I slept in a hospital bed under thin blankets with nurses walking by, and I slept like a normal person. It was the only time I'd felt safe in weeks. They checked my stomach. There was nothing there. No nails, no plastic, no cement. Nothing that matched what I knew I'd put in my mouth. It was like it had never happened. Like the only proof was the damage in my mouth and the fear in my head. When they finally discharged me, I drove home with my hands tight on the steering wheel. The closer I got, the more my chest tightened. The house looked the same as always, sitting quiet and ordinary on its little piece of land. I stood in the living room for a long time without taking off my shoes, trying to decide if I was walking into my own life or into a trap. I checked the backyard shed first. Nothing seemed out of place. No sign of where the nails had come from. No obvious reason I would have been in there in the middle of a storm. I checked my bedroom. Nothing. I checked the kitchen. Nothing. Slowly, reluctantly, I admitted there was one place I'd been avoiding. One place that kept showing up in the background of all of this like a warning I didn't want to read. The basement. The basement door was cracked open again. I stared at the gap, at the darkness between the door and the frame. It felt like the house was watching me through it, waiting to see whether I'd finally look. The muddy smear I remembered seeing, dragged near the doorway like someone had tracked in a storm, was gone now. The floor was clean and dry, like it had never been there at all. I turned on the basement light and eased the door open all the way. The smell rolled up immediately, damp and old. I stepped onto the wooden stairs, and each step creaked under my weight. The sound echoed down into the space below. Halfway down, I paused, listening. Nothing. No movement, no dripping water, just the quiet hum of the light. When I reached the bottom, I looked around at the boxes I'd stored there, the random furniture covered in dust, the old junk my grandparents never threw away. I took a few careful steps forward, scanning the walls. That's when I saw it. A hole. Not a crack. Not a missing piece of drywall. An actual opening in the wall, perfectly dark, about the size of a basketball. The edges looked rough, like someone had torn through from the inside. It didn't make sense with the layout of the house. There shouldn't have been empty space behind that wall. There should have been earth, or foundation, or something solid. But the hole led into blackness, as if the wall had been cut out into nowhere. My mouth went dry. I took one step toward it, careful, slow. The basement suddenly felt colder, and the air felt stale in a way that made me think of closed rooms and long time. A sound came from behind the stack of old boxes on the left. A fast, sudden movement. Before I could even shout, someone burst out. A man. He moved like an animal that had been cornered, thin, frantic, all sharp angles and quick breaths. For a split second, he turned his head, and I saw his face in the basement light. Eyes wide, mouth slightly open, like he was as terrified of me as I was of him. Then he ran, straight at the hole. My mind tried to catch up, tried to tell me he was going to slam into the wall, that he'd hit drywall and fall, that this was impossible. He didn't slam into anything. He dropped his shoulder and forced himself into that opening, pressing and twisting like something without bones. He pushed his arms through first, then his head, then the rest of him followed in a horrible, wriggling way, like a rat wearing human skin, like a worm crawling back into the ground. His body should not have fit. It should have gotten stuck. It should have broken. But it didn't. I stood frozen, watching him disappear into the dark inch by inch, as if the wall was swallowing him. And as I stared, a sick thought formed in my mind, slow and undeniable. The shape of him, the height, the messy hair, the clothes, the way he moved like he owned my bones. That 1 second when I saw his face clearly was enough. Recognition hit me so hard I felt it in my stomach. That man was me.